Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating new theory that might just change how you think about power, information, and risk inside one of the world's most powerful militaries. So let's get right into this central paradox. You got China in the middle of this absolutely massive military modernization, but at the exact same time, it's purging the very top leaders who were handpicked to make it all happen. It doesn't seem to make sense, right? So what's really going on here? All right, first things first, let's just get a sense of the scale of this upheaval. What exactly are we talking about when we say a purge at the top of the People's Liberation Army? Yeah, we are not talking about small fry here. These are the most senior uniformed officers in the entire country. The actual architects of China's military future. Imagine a big tech company firing its lead engineers right before a huge product launch. That's the kind of disruption we're seeing. It's a big deal. So when you see a shakeup this big, a few standard explanations usually pop into your head. Let's round up the usual suspects. These are kind of the go-to theories for analysts, right? A leader is just coup-proofing his regime, or maybe one political faction is taking out another, or, maybe it's just a classic, straightforward crackdown on corruption. But the thing is, the source material for this explainer makes a pretty strong case that none of these really fit the facts. And this, right here, is the crucial point. The generals getting the boot, they were overwhelmingly appointed by the current leadership. They're supposed to be the ultimate insiders. Plus, there are no obvious signs of a coup brewing or some big political crisis that would make a leader start cleaning house. See, all those theories assume the leader knows exactly who the bad guys are. But what if the real problem is the exact opposite? What if it's about not knowing who to trust at all? So what if this whole story isn't about loyalty or treason? What if it's really about a leader who just can't get a clear picture of what's happening on the ground? What if it's all about making these incredibly high-stakes decisions with incomplete or noisy information? Well, a fascinating new paper from Purdue University offers up an explanation that isn't really rooted in politics at all, but in the economics of information. It suggests these purges aren't necessarily a sign of political chaos, but maybe a rational, if kind of brutal, response to a really fundamental problem of just trying to run a huge organization. This quote pretty much gets to the heart of the whole theory. So imagine you're the leader at the very top. They call you the principal. You're looking at all these reports and data points, but from where you're sitting, three totally different motives can look exactly the same. So, how does this actually work in the real world? Let's break it down with a simple analogy. It really helps you see how a leader can basically be flying blind. Okay, let's say you're in charge of a massive project, like rolling out a new fleet of jet fighters, and one of your generals misses a key deadline. From way up at the top, all you see is that missed deadline. That's the signal. You have no idea what the real reason is. Was it a corrupt officer who was stealing funds? Was it an obstructionist just dragging their feet? Or was it an honest expert making a really sound professional call that the original timeline was just unsafe or totally unrealistic? The signal is the same. The true motives are invisible. And this leads to a concept from economics called statistical discrimination. Now, this isn't about prejudice. It's about making a calculated decision based on the only information you actually have, that noisy signal. When the cost of being wrong is catastrophic, like, say, a military failure, you just can't afford to take a chance. So you act on the signal you can see, not the motive you can't. So the process kind of follows this core logic. First, you roll out a huge, complex modernization plan. That creates a ton of uncertainty. Then, the leadership starts getting these noisy signals, missed deadlines, weird audit flags, deviations from the plan. And because they can't tell the good faith deviations from the bad ones, they just set a very narrow window of what's acceptable. Anyone who strays too far from that blueprint for any reason gets removed. It's all about minimizing risk. At the end of the day, the goal isn't necessarily punishing corruption. It's something called variance compression. That's just a technical way of saying you're forcing everyone to stick rigidly to the central plan. The purges become a tool to stamp out any and all deviation. It creates uniformity and predictability, even if it means you end up firing some of your best people who might actually see a better way of doing things. Okay, so it's a pretty compelling theory, but does it actually hold up? Does it match the evidence on the ground? Let's take a look at the data. Okay, check out the timing here. The purges didn't really happen during some big political crisis. They clustered about 6 to 8 years after the massive 2015 military reforms were launched. Now, that's exactly when deviations from that new, super complex plan would start to become visible and measurable. It's just what the theory would predict. And look at this. We see a direct link between how complex a modernization mission is and how many of its leaders get fired. The Rocket Force and the Navy, which are facing the toughest and most novel technical challenges, saw the highest dismissal rates. Again, this fits the model perfectly. More complexity means more uncertainty, which means more noisy signals. And that leads to more dismissals too. You guessed it, compress that variance. What's so powerful about this idea is that it's not just about military purges. This is a fundamental problem of how any large centralized organization works, especially when it's trying to change in a big way. I mean, think about it. A CEO trying to roll out a new global tech platform, or a government trying to reform its entire healthcare system. They all face the same dilemma. You need centralized control to make your vision happen, but you also desperately need local experts to adapt and innovate on the ground. This theory, it really just describes that inherent tension between those two forces, a tension that plays out in boardrooms and government ministries all over the world. And that leaves us with this final kind of provocative thought. This model shows that punishing all deviation can be a perfectly rational strategy if your main goal is to minimize risk. But innovation, by its very nature, is deviation. It's all about finding a better way that isn't in the original blueprint. So if your system is designed to stamp out all that variance, you might also be stamping out your greatest source of progress. It's a paradox every large organization has to wrestle with. Thanks for watching.